TVOT.
Thank you so much for joining. This is A Data Star is Born. Thought we'd make a little play on the great movie. No standard bar charts yet. There will be some. What we want to do today is I'm going to quickly let each of my panelists kind of introduce themselves. But when I was putting this panel together, and I actually do one every year, I really took the aspect of it around data, because data is something that we all kind of talk about. We all kind of talk about big data. We talk about data lakes and data privacy right now, and these are natural transgressions of natural evolution of how you work with data. And I think it's a very interesting topic because there's a lot of people who don't understand it. So what I try to do with this panel that I built today is really bring some different perspectives. And the perspectives is really around some of these voices up here who have been around this industry and are helped shaping it on very different points than you would think around traditional TV. So I'll let Nadya introduce herself real quick, and then we'll kind of get started and go down the line.
Nadya Kohl. I am EVP of Data Acquisition and Business Development at PlaceIQ. I've been there for 4 years. Prior to that, I was with Experian Marketing Services for 11 years, where I was a founder of the addressable television business and also the audience services business.
Hi, I'm Nicole Stein. I currently work at IBM in the Watson Advertising Division. Prior to that, I was at Videology for 2 years. And prior to that, various publisher sites like Yahoo, Demand Media, and prior to that, the agency side. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Aruna Paramasivam. I'm the Global VP of Data and Publisher Partnerships at Captify, a search intelligence platform. Prior to this, I was at L'Oreal brand side, head of data acquisition and partnerships. And before that, I was on the DSP side, heading up audiences at MediaMath.
My name's Huang, and I think we, other than Nicole, I think we all have very unique names. It would be a very hard one if somebody was actually a writer having to put it down, but it's actually kind of funny.
I'd like to think I'm unique.
You are unique, but your name is your name is more usual than the rest of us on this panel.
Statistically more.
Yes, statistically. But what actually is kind of even more funny is that my official title when I got to Merkle was head of data acquisition. I was like, my God, I can't have that title. Like, you got to give me a better title. I was like, what? That is the worst thing, because you're going to get hit by vendors all the time. And then, so it's actually kind of funny because the process of it, and I'll show you some of the slides where this really kind of gets into why data acquisition was very critical to a lot of our companies and where the business is at right now, or the early curve of some of these businesses. So, I have some setup slides real quick. So right up here, this is in the last 2 years. This is the $6.4 billion worth of sales of companies have been sold that had data. IPG was the most recent one. Well done by them. $2.2 billion on that one. Merkle, I'm kind of partial to. Moat was sold to Oracle. Cruxbot was bought by Salesforce. Gracenote by Nielsen. Placed by Snapchat, and then Arbor and Circulate by LiveRamp. And then I put this one over there, which this one was announced, so I'm not giving you any interesting information, but Epsilon is looking at a strategic review, which if they say that publicly, then yes, they're going to get sold. But they do $2.2 billion in revenues. I mean, this is a massive sale of items. So I think about it, and Curtis Barone's up there from Epsilon, very happy about that. And he was at Axiom previously, so he has a golden touch. But in any case, this kind of gives you a perspective as we kind of talk about data and what does the market kind of value it. So really within there, I have to say a quick note on data regulations, because I did put that in the title, and I don't expect any of these ladies to talk about it, data regulations, but really within it, GDPR kind of kicked this all off, and that was about 2 years ago, and it got implemented this year. And these are very basic tenets. These are tenets that we shouldn't run away from. These are basic items, but those are the all 10 items, which is the Bill of Rights almost in the European Union. And if you're able to follow these, it should be pretty good. But the basic ones is that if a consumer wants to change their information, they can. Can you be forgotten? Do you have consent around it? These are basic items. And what really happened is it got enacted in May, and this is now the user experience. The biggest change is up there where you have these areas in light yellow where it says, click here. We're going to be tracking you with cookies. That is the consumer experience. The rest of the work is on the back end, on the data side, where many of us have to ensure that we are properly handling people's data correctly. I couldn't figure out any other icon except the little lightning bolt, but there's only 2 states with data privacy-like legislation enacted. Vermont has theirs done. Pennsylvania and Colorado have theirs. I imagine within 1 year, next year, this time, we'll probably be talking about a federal law. So that's the real basis of how we look at data. So when we're talking about the right to use it, there is a path forward. So now, with all being said, where are we with targeting today using data?
So with targeting data, it's obviously very important to do it the right way, make sure that there is consent, and your data collection methods are very important. On the same level, you also want to make sure that you're collecting data in a transparent way and it's deterministic signals. So there's definitely quite a few factors to balance out with data targeting.
Yeah, I think if I jump in and say, where are we with targeting? I think that the overhang of regulation has put everyone on notice to do it right. But if you're doing it right and you're doing it with credible companies who, within their practices, ensure that the data that a brand is using is not only thoughtfully and respectfully and in a self-regulatory way collected properly, then you can unlock some tremendous opportunities to be much more relevant to the consumer. Now, I don't mean to sound like motherhood and apple pie. We've all been to the conference where what I just said gets said. But when you're in my line of work, PlaceIQ is a data and technology company centered around processing anonymous mobile signals so as to understand and give brands insights into the habits of consumers. In collecting our data, what we seek to do is to unlock for instance, television landscapes that have up until this point been unavailable. So, in terms of targeting, how does the game change for a medium that has never had a reach problem? It's never suffered from low spend or a low amount of consumers. But what we see is brands who have traditionally been very blind as to the spend of their TV dollar and then what happened in the real world. A perfect example of this, and then cut me off and redirect me if you want me to just shorten up my storytelling, but a perfect example of this is big spenders in the QSR and fast food industry, where the tender is typically cash, so you can't use that as any sort of insight key. You really, if somebody goes to a fast food place, they're not filling out surveys or, giving you a lot of signals about who they are. Enter the ability to understand and observe the types of visitors that go to, let's say, Arby's or McDonald's or what have you. And if you're able to then understand who those visitors are, those marketers are now able to address their messages regionally in an appropriate way. They can understand who the consumer is and now use the same data to target across screens in a way that then amplifies the behavior, the performance of the multiple channels that they use. So what we've done with retailers, for instance, is use the same data for both planning, targeting. I think planning gets forgotten a lot of the time. Planning, targeting, and then measurement across screens. The net effect was that there was 70% lift in the performance of TV plus mobile in that campaign, where the results of TV and mobile are amplified.
So Are we thinking that, and we'll kind of touch on the growth of targeting, but where is targeting kind of evolved in your guys' opinion from basic of demos to, Nadya was talking about, location-based other things. What are you seeing there?
So from what we're seeing, and I think what the industry is seeing, is it's intent-based. So you take past behaviors, and we're all taking past behaviors from your optimizations, and you're looking at your first party, you're looking at your third party, and you are optimizing, but looking at the outcomes from what you've done in the past to predict your models for the future. It's all about predicting consumer intentions and moving towards predictive audiences. And you think about the slide that you saw earlier, IPG purchased Axiom. Dentsu purchased Merkle. A lot of that is to understand the identity, to understand people, right? And the reason why we want to understand people is because we are trying to understand their behaviors, their attitudes. We talk demo, attitudinal, behavioral, location, and we're looking at their past to predict their future. And so you understand their identity, and so it's audience-based, but it's audience-based to recognize how we really can predict what their next move is, and so that we can purchase that impression or purchase that next, that intention-based. So from an IBM perspective, we would then look at first party, third party, apply machine learning to that to create predictive models for a targeting layer.
So at Captify, we really look at intent as well of the consumer, and how we do that is with search intelligence. We feel search tells you what the consumer is thinking, kind of gives you a heads up on where their thoughts are, and even before they engage with an ad, you know what they're looking for. So that also, to Nicole's point, gives you their intention, their attitudes, their behavior. So there's so many different ways to discern that. You use predictive. We use search from publishers. So essentially, when a publisher is providing search terms, we know what their users were looking for, and that way we can empower the publisher, or in this case, the platform for television, and give them a heads up. Hey, this is what people are looking for. A great example with Captify was when we worked with the airline industry, and we were able to tell a well-known airline that people were searching for these 4 specific routes that were just not available in an economical way right now in the market, and they were able to put these routes in place. So it's kind of giving a heads up, kind of understanding what the consumer wants, and then being able to take action on that.
I will say that having hung around a demographic data provider for a number of years, and I think also we talk about demos as, age and gender, and I think there's, demos get a bad rap, and there's so much even runway, though, to, in a canny way, use the extended power of demographics. I think that just in TV now what we're starting to see is the adoption of a more CRM-based way of thinking of the description of the demographics of that consumer, because it's so predictive, and it trains the models. So I just shout out for demos.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think it's interesting for all of us here in probably the group here, is we were talking about fraud 2 years ago. Oh God, there's a lot of fraud, runaway fraud here and there. But I think when you're applying a data layer, and I think a constant theme is around the intent, I think we're really seeing a change, because the conversation isn't, and maybe you guys are having to have the conversations with advertisers again. Are we having to talk about fraud? Or are we really talking about what signals, what intent are they looking for? What are you guys hearing out in the marketplace right now?
Definitely how we're sourcing that intent. I think a lot of emphasis has been put on the data collection methods. Second-party data has become very popular now. it's first party, second party, and then you augment with third party. Whereas I think a few years ago, third party was what was readily available. But now brands have started working with one another to create non-competitive data sets, share data, there's data co-ops. So that's what we're hearing a lot is where do you get your data from? How do you source it? How does it get to you? So those are the questions that we're hearing.
I agree as well. I think that's why so many of the agencies now are buying these companies, because they want to own data. They don't want to have to say we are going out for third-party data. They are trying to own their, and I'm saying this in quotes because technically they don't own it. They want to say that they own data so that they can have a differentiation point, or they can have a value proposition in the marketplace to their brands to say that they have first, and I'm doing this in quotes again, first party data that they have. So they have their own, and I'm going to do it in quotes, a data stack. All of these agencies, all the holding companies are creating their own data stacks of first-party data that they can offer to their clients. You are doing the same to create. You have M1, Merkle, CRM, first-party data that you are offering to your clients that is part of your platform to say we have a identity layer that you can serve your clients that's clean. And that's the thing. You want to offer clean data. And I mean, I know
we
what
have the cleanest, just in case.
The cleanest.
Cleanest.
But and I know I can say this, and I'm sitting next to PlaceIQ. I'm at IBM. We have the second largest we are the second largest location company in the world to Google. And the reason why is every 15 minutes we are pinging mobile devices because we acquired the weather company. So we are pinging. We don't aggregate it. We are not a network, but we do have clean location data. Not everybody can say that. You want to be able to say that you are a first party. You have first party clean data, and that's what's most important. And that's the notion of sourcing your data.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is a nice segue into this, is that there was a report by the IAB, and I love the name, the IAB Data Center for Excellence. Like there isn't a Center for Excellence, but this is the actual group that put it out, and it's done by the Winterberry Group. And then there are two companies kind of, Winterberry does it for the U.S., and they came out with U.S. companies spent $19.2 billion last year on acquisition of data audiences and the solution around to manage it. So in one case, we're all talking here about us taking data and using it, but there's also this where Rana was talking about second party data, where they take in data and then they kind of put it in their own mixing bowl before they send it out the door. So the figure that they had was around 17% increase year over year. That's a pretty healthy number, and I think when we're starting to look at it, and to you guys' point, here is where a lot of the growth is coming from. Digital is now the number one item around U.S. data acquisition, around dollars wise. It's around $3.5 billion. Last year was definitely much lower. I think it was 1.7 if my math is correct around that. So when you guys look at this kind of stuff and you look at your companies and the mix of clients, where are you guys really seeing some of the data targeting flowing? Because transactional was very hot, and I think we all kind of came around that. And transactional will be store sales, and that's really good for when you are a grocery retailer that has lots of data every day, but then when you go on the step up of consumer goods, you're not going to get it very often. So what are you guys seeing as far as really trends within each data sets, any of these sectors that you guys are kind of seeing in the marketplace today?
I'll jump in. In terms of, I can't, the reason I ever ended up, just full disclosure, the reason I ended up at PlaceIQ was because 5 or 6 years ago, I was responsible for global strategy for EMS, Experience Marketing Services. And I was in that second row right there. And I was thinking, in a more mobile world, what are we missing? And next thing you know, I'm at PlaceIQ. But anyway, on the way to all of this data that we see arrayed here, I think that the terrestrial needs to make almost a migration into being, merged with digital, because I don't know how you really separate those anymore from a trending perspective. What I'm seeing in terms of our own business, and we are a data company, right, that serves the media category. Transactional, to me, has always been king, right? So first-party data, always king. Purchase data, always king. So what we've done over the course of the last year is engage in multiple truth set evaluations, third-party evaluations with the likes of Comscore, Oracle, Quantifind, et cetera, where we have figured out that the visitation data that we have has an R-squared of 95.95 and above in terms of its predictive power toward a purchase. Now, that isn't, kind of a PSA about PlaceIQ. It's more about how do you learn to take the data that we have available to us and then aim at the things that the advertiser really cares about, which is they don't care about a visit, they care about a purchase and getting close to the visit. So that's, one of the trends I think we're finding really interesting and really, exciting.
Yeah, when I was brand side, I would say transactional data was extremely important, just to be able to get down to that SKU level, which is really hard. You look at location, you look at store visits, but when you're a brand and someone enters a department store like a Macy's or a Saks Fifth Avenue, there's just no way to know which side of the department store they went. Were they buying a sweater? Were they buying perfume? So at that stage, it's really being creative. What would be ideal is if retailers could share that level of data and we could have some sort of co-op. I think that's pretty familiar to you, Huang,
yes,
from your past.
It's a very good business model. Rana brings up a very interesting point. I think in a world such as a L'Oreal, they, half of, and I'm going back to my days of just saying broad strokes, half of all the sales was done at Macy's. Shockingly, Macy's is a powerhouse in the health and beauty sector. Then you have grocery, mass drug, and it's all spread out. And then, in turn, some of these brands are trying to do direct and do e-commerce. So when you start thinking about this, you can see where marketing services around data has to be kind of spread out across the board here, because in many cases, PlaceIQ is bringing a lot of data, and Captify and IBM, they're saying, bring us all your data, and we'll help you figure out what to get at, because I think we've all kind of tapped into most of the really easy data sets, and now we're really having to look below and what are the real goals of people.
And while I have Nicole sitting next to me, Captify is actually in the process of partnering with IBM Watson for the location data, because we're in search and what we need to know is where this person is now and where they're looking to go. And a really good way to find that out is through a weather property where someone is located in New York but is searching for weather in Florida, for instance. So just because they're searching away from home base, you can draw so many conclusions about where they're going. So it's also about platforms partnering with each other, not always retailer brand or the traditional types of partnerships that you would think would come from second-party data.
I actually, one thing that I'm dying for CPG brands to do more of is to evaluate how these sources of data can help us understand occasion states better. And by that I mean, back in the day, we worked with an OTC pain relief company, and you had to triangulate from about 6 different directions that the target was probably a working mom, that had a very busy life and suffered from sleeplessness and so forth and so on. And it was a really intricate kind of exercise. One thing that I think we have at hand is with these and with just, I think, audiences or just consumers that are more able to communicate back to the brand, we've got such an opportunity to start to really uncover occasion states for CPG in a way we never had before, like tailgaters. Tailgaters, to me, I don't know how I would have told you that unless somebody told me they had season tickets to the Meadowlands, right? So it's these things that I think still are bound to be uncovered and can be really exciting.
So do we have our, is the wind at our backs for this type of intent? Because there's a special type of person, and we tried to do this when I was at Kroger, and we failed because there's just so many mechanics, and it wasn't anything that IBM, because I'm prefacing this for IBM, because humidity comes in and we're like, oh great, we're gonna take out the conditioner market. We're gonna cannibalize everything for Walmart and go after that way. But there's a lot to do for every market to get it down to that discrete level. So in that particular example, and I preface it wasn't anything that IBM did, and Nicole, I don't even think that you were there yet, but it was still owned by the Weather Channel. But do you guys think that in order to actually make this all happen, are we there yet, or are we getting there?
I'd say we're getting there, and one nice thing about IBM Watson's weather capabilities is it's very real time now. So it's also how recent your data is. Recency is very big in some of these signals. It doesn't help if you get this data 24 hours later and that humidity factor is gone, because I've been in that hair sector just as you have. So, frizz-free, the conditioners, the makeup products. It's not a direct correlation you would make to weather data, but you're right, it applies. But it's also very important to get it as soon as it's happening.
So it's actually the consumer behavior. So we're able to report on the weather every 15 minutes. And so it's weather data is event-based. A lot of the triggering and a lot of the targeting is audience-based. And what we have problems with is the way we buy often is audience-based, but what we offer is event-based. So we can actually give you the weather every 15 minutes. It's how fast can the consumers react and how fast can our advertisers react. So that's actually the limitations that we are up against, because frankly, we can serve that ad every 15 minutes. But in addition to that, LiveRamp is limited. LiveRamp doesn't act as fast. We're noticing that our partners are not able to act as fast as we can actually act. So sometimes we are limited by our partners.
And also, I think this is where location comes in. You don't want to serve an ad to somebody who's not near a Walmart or who's not near where your product is being sold. So it's like everybody's data matters. It's weather to the CPG product to the location of purchase. Of course, there's also the ability to buy online, but if it's weather related, you want that product within the next couple of hours.
That being said, so weather is interesting, and it's we talk.
It always changes, right?
Sorry.
It always changes.
It always changes. Actually, we can talk about weather or not talk about weather for hours, and that is close to a movie quote. And if anyone can find me afterwards and know what movie quote that is close to, we can talk or not talk for hours. But the thing about weather, and it does go hand in hand with location, and that's actually why IBM purchased us. IBM purchased us because weather impacts so much. Weather impacts supply chain. Weather impacts our airlines. Weather impacts it. Actually, we generate 400 terabytes of data every single day because of the weather, and that's an immense amount of data. And IBM is one of the only companies that can actually manage that type of data because of AI. And weather, actually, the type of weather triggering and the type of weather data that we are able to mine, we have over 30 different variables that we look at in order to generate the segments and the triggers that we offer our advertisers. And that takes in everything from humidity to barometric pressure, but that data is not just clean, it's very specific for our advertisers. But the thing about weather and location, which I think is very appropriate in something that you had mentioned earlier, is about how you use that type of data. The idea of location engagement and location mapping. So just so you're aware, IBM is so incredibly strict about data, and we actually are very compliant with GDPR because we have the highest security in terms of GDPR compliance. Just so everyone's aware, we actually only we talk about location building blocks. We don't offer our location data to anybody right now because of GDPR. That being said, the idea of location mapping, so following a customer journey as opposed to a point in time, is so much more important about creating a strategy for your consumer. So understanding that journey, and they're in routine and they're out of routine. That is something that is incredibly important for our advertisers and our brand marketers to know. What is that consumer journey? What is in their journey? And what is their out of routine? That can help us understand what consumers are doing. And to do that at scale, that is a win for our marketers. That location journey mapping, that is a win if we could do that at scale.
We're one of the areas that we're having a very successful time right now is exactly what you're saying, which is brands. Brands are confined at this point to, especially in TV, blanketing a DMA. They may not serve the whole DMA. They actually have an addressable market, really that's half of the DMA. So in taking what the types of things that we work on every day, what we're finding tremendous performance from are what we call smart market audiences, which is exactly what you're saying, which is, look, I know we are all terribly exciting humans, but on average, you only go 3 places every day. I'm just going to break it to you. 3 places, which it's probably a boring 3 for me, but maybe it's an exciting 3 for you. In it being habitual, you're going to consume and you're going to spend your dollars near your work, near your home, or in the commute somewhere, right? So why would a brand spend more media than they needed to instead of optimizing toward the markets where the consumption has a chance of happening? It can be a few miles away, but not in an area where I just don't have accessibility.
As I'm sitting here, I do sit with a lot of the planners and buyers, and I always tell them, let me tell you about this industry that has a closed environment where all the audience and targeting information is from one company called Nielsen. You have this data, you can't port it out very easily, and you can't bring in your own new targeting. So when you think about the world of data and how is this really going to impact linear television, OTT, addressable TV, it can be applied. But how do we bridge this back into the world of linear? And if you figure it out, I'll pay you, because I'm losing my mind, because I speak to this company, and it is so frustrating that it's not in an open environment. Where do you guys are you guys seeing some of the dollars shift from linear to more different types of addressable means within television and video?
All right.
The answer is yes.
Yes. I am seeing the shift. We were joking outside that when I was with Experian and we started the addressable television business there, it was 2005. And, every year since has been the year addressable is going to take off. But it didn't in 2006 or 7 or 8 or 9. Okay. Scroll forward to right now, and I am actually cautiously optimistic. I don't know if this is the year, but we're on it. We are seeing, with the encroachment of, if you will, more at-scale OTT, more at-scale advanced applications, there's more pressure, I think, on linear. And so I think that what I'm seeing that's terribly interesting is, speaking of the company that you named, I'm actually seeing a bunch of upstart measurement companies coming into the fold and using the ability to create a SaaS model quickly that's a knowledgeable SaaS model directed at bringing in all sorts of first-party and third and second-party data. I'm seeing them succeed because they are finally, giving a look in the box to the advertiser as to how it's all working. So I feel that the ability to measure and the groundswell that I'm seeing in terms of working with partners that are using our data because they are giving creative applications to their advertisers, it's not a trickle anymore. I don't know that it's a tsunami, but it's a respectable enough flow that I'm feeling it.
So, I mean, for me, and I have a couple ex-coworkers in the audience, but I went to videology because of addressable TV. I mean, I saw the writing on the wall, and I 100% jumped on that. Now, things have changed, but things have changed, and the TV, and I'm not going to call it TV, the video marketplace is booming. I mean, yes, dollars have shifted to video, to digital. But where are they spending in digital? The majority of the digital landscape is still social. So, Facebook and Google and search, that's really the majority of where, the dollars are. That being said, television's not going anywhere. And we say television still in linear, but those lines are blurred. So OTT and advanced TV, whatever we want to call it, because there are so many names. And so OTT, TV, advanced TV, connected TV, video, all the screens, it is growing, and it's going to continue to grow because we are creating more space for it. Every time there's a new screen, whether it's a gaming device, a tablet, a watch, every time we create a new screen, we are giving television more room for content.
Yep.
So we are creating more time to consume video programming.
In that point is very interesting because there are more opportunities, and what you're going to see is more reach of television, but it goes in the face of linear measurement because it's all about the minute that you're watching versus just an exposure and it's exposure. So, and quick plug, I did think that videology was going to be great. I partnered with them early 13, and I think that they're going to be proven right, but it just won't be under the videology name.
It won't be under that name. But to answer your question, yes, dollars have shifted to digital, but that doesn't mean television dollars are shrinking.
Yeah. And so I think two big headwinds is here. We're talking about the data being at scale and being closer to the consumer, more intent. I do want to talk a little bit about search around the search items because I think that search is going to be a very interesting item. Obviously, it's very dominated by Google and for the most part, but there are a lot of things that I think they're now opening up around data.
Absolutely.
They're now allowing you to apply data on a match record basis to Google search terms, which I think is very interesting. And then given all the voice, either Alexa or Google Home, and saying, "Hey, pull up this." Yeah. I think that's going to be very interesting.
And I think search is also just evolving. There is now voice search, there's visual search. And as we talk about data and following the consumer, this is also a very consumer-centric market we're in. The consumer has so many choices. And again, going back to what you're talking about with choices in television, as we'd like to call it, in some ways, the consumer dictates where the market is going because you are going to go where they are spending their time, their money, and whatnot. So we're going to create more consumer-centric experiences to attract them. And in some ways, your data plan, your mediums have to follow the consumer. In a lot of ways, when you work either brand side or platform, you want to be consumer-centric. The consumer has to be in the center of what you're doing.
And I think that the fact visual search, I think, is going to be very interesting because in a sense, you're moving away from the screen.
Yeah.
A lot of your things you don't even need the device itself, and where that's going to play with content around innovation. It's going to be very interesting.
Yeah,
to see.
and I think that's why it's also important to empower the platforms, empower the publishers, empower television, so people or consumers in this case can really find what they're looking for and provide them with these types of tools to make the search or the finding a little bit easier.
And since we're talking about the publishers, and Nicole, you would be considered a publisher somewhat, but in this realm, I think 2 years ago or 3, we all kind of thought Facebook might be the Antichrist. They just might be the most evil thing that we can't stop. It's a locomotive. Now, they're kind of boxed into an area of just social. Their television, their video. So, which publishers do you think are, which publishers are you thinking are having a hard time? And we'll kind of talk about which publishers do you think are really building interesting things. So, from that end, from the side of saying who's going to be out there selling and driving it, it's going to be on the publishing side, right? So who are you guys thinking that's really going to be doing some very innovative things? It's the likes of Xandr, AT&T. AT&T threw their hand in the ring. But if you look at Oath, owned by Verizon, they've had some ups and downs on how they've been looking at it. What are your guys' thoughts on this?
Well, AT&T and Xandr and Oath, those are to me those are platforms. I don't see those as publishers. I see those as platforms and multi platforms. If the way I look at a publisher is a Refinery 29, I think, from my perspective, I think that everybody is up against the social and search. So if you are not Amazon, Facebook, or Google, you are it's a dogfight for dollars, literally. And you have to create amazing content if you are in an ESPN or a Refinery 29 or an NBCU. If you have ties to a broadcaster, you have much more of an advantage because you have long form and you have a tie to the broadcasters. But if you are just a digital publisher, you need it's a dogfight. It really is. That's my perspective.
And that's why I think these other types of tools are important because, yes, content is key. Content is king, as they say. But also having a website or just an interface that is friendly, user-friendly, that allows you to search quickly, whether it's voice or visual, that's also appealing aesthetically. There's just so many components that ties into social, that ties into everything else. So I think it's not just going to be by content alone. It's going to be so many components that actually create the user experience. It's very much about the user experience, I feel. If you're talking away from the Facebooks and the Amazons, it's about providing something unique or different or ease of use.
Yeah, I think the ones that I'm seeing among our clients succeeding, it's exactly as Nicole said, right? You've got the juggernauts, and so you, as a publisher, you either lay in the street and wait for the steamroller to come and run you over, right, or you go do something really well. And what we're seeing is that the publishers that have concentrated, we work with Pinterest, for instance, the publishers that, and that could arguably be social, right? But it's content, right? And so they are fixated on engagement and measuring how the engagement in that funnel led to visitation/sale. And so they're singular in that purpose, right? So the Refinery 29s or the pop sugars, the ones that are a representation of an engaged population, like the pop sugars and Refinery 29s, seem to then know their population so well that then they go make the right steps to provide the measurement proof that then gets them more business.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the ways that Captify operates is we're a platform that also serves ads, but we want to understand the user before we serve the ads. So our data partnerships are also in some ways our media partnerships. So we always ask to collect data on the users before they become a media partner, because we really feel that it is a loop, a feedback loop. The more we understand your users, the better we can serve the media on your sites.
Yeah, and first, Nicole, I will say when I said the publishers, I was like, but it actually is true. So I would agree that is a very good depiction of Xandr, Oath, Google. I am not as bullish about Amazon, and it's not because I used to work at a competing retailer, but I just think that it's very hard for certain brands to sell in there. It is very hard for you to make money as a brand within Amazon because they do control a lot of it. You might as well just try something else until there's critical mass of your product on that route. So
would you consider another e-tailer a publisher? So
they're all trying.
Become a loose term.
It is and I do like content is king, and I think a lot of things of what we talked about here is context is right behind it.
Yeah.
It is not subservient to it. It is content and context are very critical in our data world today. But I do think that publishers are looking at it. I mean, at Kroger, we had very big ambitions around that, but you only have so far away. I mean, Heinz, they'll want to advertise on our page, but would Allstate Insurance, you don't have that audience coming in there unless they're paying a boatload of promotional dollars. So with that being said, I think overall we learned a lot about the different perspectives, and I like the different voices around this. And we are really getting into the case where we are seeing data move from a case where it's just sitting on the shelf, but it's more active than ever, and it's closer to the consumer than we have before. And as the next year, 2019 hits, I'll be more interested to see where these companies are kind of taking this aspect. With that, thank you so much.
TVOT